What happens when an entire galaxy treats your species like cosmic garbage? When every alien civilization laughs at your primitive technology and calls you the weakest link in the galactic chain? Most species would crumble under such humiliation. Most would accept their place at the bottom. But humans? We don't just get mad, we get creative. This isn't another story about humans being the strongest or the smartest. This is about what happens when a species that's been mocked, dismissed, and underestimated for centuries finally decides to show the galaxy what true human ingenuity looks like. It's about the moment when laughter turns to screams, when mockery becomes desperate pleas for mercy. The aliens thought they knew us. They thought our small ships, our limited technology, and our short lifespans made us irrelevant. They were about to learn that underestimating humanity isn't just a mistake, it's a fatal one. Get ready for a story where the underdogs don't just win. They redefine what victory means. Where human creativity, determination, and our unique ability to turn weakness into strength creates the most feared armada the galaxy has ever seen. The universe mocked us. Now it's our turn to laugh. Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the massive viewport of the UES Defiance, watching the Galactic Council's fleet assemble in the distance. Their ships gleamed like jewels against the black void, sleek Vorthan cruisers with their energy shields shimmering like soap bubbles, massive Krellan dreadnoughts that looked like floating cities, and the elegant Zephyrian vessels that moved through space like silver dancers. Then, there was humanity's contribution to this grand alliance. 12 small frigates that looked like rust buckets compared to the alien magnificence surrounding them. Sarah could almost hear the snickers echoing across the communication channels. "Admiral," came the voice of Captain Rodriguez from the bridge. "The Galactic Council is requesting our fleet status report." Sarah sighed. Another opportunity for the aliens to remind everyone just how pathetic Earth's military contribution was to their war against the Devourers. "Send them our standard report, Captain. 12 ships, minimal shielding, projectile weapons, crew complement of 2,000 total." The response came quickly, as it always did. High Admiral Zextar of the Vorthan Empire appeared on the main screen, his four eyes blinking in what Sarah had learned was the Vorthan equivalent of barely contained laughter. "Ah, Admiral Chun," Zextar said, his translator giving his voice a mechanical quality. "I see humanity has brought their entire, formidable, fleet to this engagement." The pause before formidable made it clear what he really thought. "Perhaps it would be best if your ships remained in the rear support positions? We wouldn't want any unfortunate accidents." Sarah's jaw tightened. For 3 years, ever since humanity had been reluctantly accepted into the Galactic Council, this had been their role. Stay in the back, provide minimal support, and try not to get in the way while the real military powers handled the serious fighting. "Understood, High Admiral," Sarah replied through gritted teeth. "We'll maintain our position." The screen went dark, and Sarah could feel the eyes of her bridge crew on her. They'd all heard the condescension in Zextar's voice. They'd all felt the sting of being treated like cosmic comic relief. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, Sarah's tactical officer, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if I may, the crew's getting pretty tired of being treated like we're flying garbage scows." Sarah turned to look at him. Jackson was old Earth military, a man who'd cut his teeth fighting pirates in the asteroid belt before first contact changed everything. His weathered face showed the frustration they all felt. "What would you suggest, Commander?" Sarah asked. "Well, ma'am, they keep talking about our primitive weapons and our archaic ship designs," Jackson said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Maybe it's time we showed them why humans became the dominant species on a death world without any help from advanced aliens." Sarah felt a familiar stirring in her chest, the same feeling she'd had as a young pilot when facing impossible odds in the Belt Wars. Humans had a saying, "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." "What do you have in mind?" she asked. Over the next several hours, as the Allied fleet prepared for their assault on the Devourer stronghold at Kepler Station, Sarah found herself in intense discussions with her fleet commanders. The beauty of having only 12 ships was that everyone knew everyone else. There were no bureaucratic layers, no complex chains of command. Just 3,000 humans who were sick of being laughed at. Captain Rodriguez of the UES Defiance was the first to speak up during the emergency meeting. Admiral, we've been analyzing Devourer tactics for 3 years now. The Council fleets always use the same strategy: massive shield walls, energy bombardments, and overwhelming firepower. And it works, added Captain Park from the U.S. Determination. The Devourers have adapted to fight those tactics. They use swarm attacks, quantum disruption fields, and adaptive armor that absorbs energy weapons. Captain Okafor from the U.S. Resilience leaned forward. But they've never fought humans before. Not really. We've always been relegated to support roles. Sarah nodded slowly. The Devourers were a mysterious race that had appeared from the galactic rim 50 years ago. They consumed entire star systems, converting matter into their bizarre biomechanical hybrid ships. They'd conquered a third of the galaxy before the Great Alliance had managed to slow their advance. But they'd never faced human tactics. What are you all thinking? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. Terran naval doctrine. Captain Rodriguez said simply. Everything we learned fighting in the belt. Hit and run, asymmetric warfare, and... He grinned. A little bit of human crazy. Captain Park pulled up a holographic display of Kepler Station. The Devourer's stronghold was massive, a converted asteroid mining facility that they'd grown into something that looked like a mixture of factory and hive. Intelligence suggested it held nearly 1 million Devourer organisms and controlled the production of their fleet in this sector. The Council's plan is to form up in a traditional battle line and pound the station's defenses until they collapse, Park explained. It'll work, eventually, but it'll cost thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of lives. Or, Captain Okafor added, 12 human ships could do something completely insane. Sarah felt that stirring in her chest grow stronger. Define insane. You remember the Battle of Ceres during the Belt Wars? Rodriguez asked. When Admiral Nakamura used mining charges to collapse half an asteroid onto the pirate base? That was different, Sarah said. Ceres was just a hollowed-out rock. This is a heavily fortified. She stopped, her mind racing. You're not seriously suggesting. The station is built into an asteroid, Okafor said. A big one, but still just a rock with alien technology grafted onto it. And we know from our mining surveys that the asteroid has several fault lines running through it. Jackson had been quiet during the discussion, but now he spoke up. Ma'am, I've been running calculations. If we could get nuclear mining charges placed at specific points along those fault lines, the entire asteroid could be split apart, Park finished. Taking the station with it. Sarah stared at the tactical display. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of plan that had gotten humanity kicked out of 3-star systems during their expansion phase. It was also brilliant. There are a few problems, Sarah said slowly. First, we'd have to get past the entire Devourer defense fleet. Second, we need to place charges precisely while under fire. Third, we'd have to escape before the asteroid came apart. Actually, Captain Park said, I've been working on that. What if we didn't try to escape? The room went quiet. Explain, Sarah said. Our ships aren't fast enough to outrun the shock wave from a collapsing asteroid that size, Park said. But they don't need to be. We've got the most heavily armored ships in the fleet because we never upgraded to energy shields. Our armor is designed to handle asteroid impacts, debris fields, and solar radiation. You're talking about riding the shock wave, Rodriguez said, understanding dawning on his face. Exactly. We plant the charges, trigger them, and surf the explosion right through the middle of the Devourer fleet. They won't be expecting it because no sane species would try it. Sarah looked around the room at her captains. These were people who'd grown up in the asteroid belt, where a single mistake meant death, and where humanity had learned to survive through ingenuity and sheer bloody-mindedness. The Council will never approve this plan, she said. Then, we don't ask permission, Captain Okafor said simply. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. In her earpiece, she could hear the chatter from the Council fleet as they prepared for their conventional assault. They were talking about acceptable loss ratios, strategic reserves, and fallback positions. They were planning for a long, grinding battle that would end in victory at an enormous cost. There's something else, she said finally. We've been carrying around Earth's latest prototype weapons for 6 months, waiting for permission to field test them. Her captains exchanged glances. Everyone knew about the experimental weapons systems that had been loaded onto their ships before they left Earth. Officially, they were still undergoing testing and couldn't be used without council approval. The new kinetic accelerators? Jackson asked. Among other things, Sarah said. The council thinks our weapons are primitive. They have no idea what human military research has been working on. She pulled up a classified display that showed the weapon systems currently installed on the human fleet. Kinetic accelerators that could fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Fusion torpedoes with variable yield warheads. Quantum entanglement communication systems that were completely undetectable. And, most importantly, the new adaptive AI targeting systems that could process battlefield data faster than any biological brain. Here's what we're going to do, Sarah said, decision made. We're going to give the galaxy a demonstration of what humans are really capable of. And we're going to do it in a way they'll never forget. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. While the Council fleet moved into position for their grand assault, the human ships quietly repositioned themselves. To outside observers, it looked like they were simply taking up their assigned support positions at the rear of the formation. In reality, they were preparing for the most audacious military operation in human history. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was impressive, hundreds of biomechanical ships that looked like someone had crossed a squid with a battleship. Their movements were coordinated with hive-mind precision, and their weapons could tear through energy shields like paper. But they'd never fought humans before. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez said quietly, all ships report ready. Charges are armed, targeting solutions are locked, and the crews are. He paused. Well, they're ready to show this galaxy what Earth is made of. Sarah nodded. In a few minutes, the Council would begin their attack. The Devourers would respond with their usual swarm tactics. And, in the chaos of the opening engagement, 12 human ships would attempt something that would either be remembered as the most brilliant tactical innovation in galactic history, or the most spectacular military disaster. Open a channel to the fleet, she ordered. Channel opened, ma'am. This is Admiral Chun to all human vessels, she said, her voice carrying across the 3,000 souls who made up humanity's entire military presence in this sector. For 3 years, we've been the galaxy's comic relief. We've been treated like primitives, like children playing with toys while the adults handle the real fighting. She paused, looking out at the alien ships that surrounded them. Today, that changes. Today, we remind the galaxy that humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by playing it safe. We did it by being smarter, tougher, and more determined than anything else that wanted to kill us. The tactical display showed the Council fleet beginning to move. The attack was starting. In 30 seconds, we're going to do something that will either get us all killed or change the course of this war, Sarah continued. Either way, we're going to do it together, and we're going to do it like humans. She took a deep breath. Fleet, prepare for Operation Crazy Ivan. Show them what we're made of. The moment the Council fleet opened fire, space erupted into chaos. Energy beams lanced across the void in brilliant colors, creating a deadly light show that would have been beautiful if it weren't designed to kill. The Devourer response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of biomechanical ships swarmed out from behind the asteroid station like angry hornets. Admiral Sarah Chun watched the tactical display with clinical detachment as the first phase of the battle unfolded exactly as expected. The Council ships formed their traditional wall formation, their energy shields overlapping to create an almost impenetrable barrier. The Devourers responded with their characteristic swarm tactics, using their superior numbers and mobility to probe for weaknesses. Just like the simulations, Lieutenant Commander Jackson observed. Both sides are fighting the last war. Sarah nodded. The Council had been fighting the Devourers for 50 years using the same basic strategy. Overwhelming firepower delivered from heavily shielded formations. It worked, but it was predictable. The Devourers had adapted their tactics accordingly, using quantum disruption fields to weaken shields and adaptive armor to absorb energy weapon impacts. What neither side expected was for 12 primitive human ships to suddenly break formation and accelerate directly into the heart of the battle. All ships, execute Phase 1, Sarah ordered. The human fleet split into 3 groups of 4 ships each, accelerating on vectors that made no tactical sense to anyone watching. Instead of supporting the main council formation, they were diving straight into the Devourer's swarm. The reaction was immediate. U.S. Defiance, this is High Admiral Zextar, came the urgent transmission. Your ships are moving out of formation. Return to your assigned positions immediately. Sarah ignored the communication. On her tactical display, she could see the confusion spreading through both fleets as they tried to understand what the humans were doing. The 12 Earth ships were small targets, moving fast and erratically. To the Devourers, they probably looked like some kind of desperate suicide run. They weren't entirely wrong. First contact with Devourer scouts in 30 seconds, Captain Rodriguez reported. Their formation is shifting to intercept us. Perfect, Sarah replied. Jackson, initiate targeting sequence for the new toys. The new toys were humanity's latest military innovation, quantum-locked kinetic accelerators. While the rest of the galaxy had focused on energy weapons, human engineers had taken a different approach. Instead of trying to match alien energy technology, they perfected the art of throwing rocks very, very fast. The first Devourer scout ship that moved to intercept the human formation learned this lesson the hard way. The U.S. Determination fired a single round from its main kinetic accelerator. The projectile was just a dense tungsten rod, nothing fancy or exotic about it. But it was moving at 12% of light speed when it hit the Devourer's ship. The result was spectacular. The biomechanical vessel simply disintegrated, vaporized by the kinetic energy of impact. There was no explosion, no dramatic fireball, just a brief flash of light. And then, empty space where the ship had been. What just happened? Came a confused transmission from one of the Vorthan captains. The Devourers were asking the same question. Their hive-mind intelligence had no framework for understanding what they'd just witnessed. Energy weapons they could adapt to. Exotic matter they could absorb. But a simple projectile moving at relativistic speeds was something entirely outside their experience. Phase 2, Sarah ordered. All ships, weapons free. Show them what human engineering looks like. What followed was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. While the Council fleet continued their traditional energy bombardment, the human ships began systematically picking apart the Devourer formation with weapons and tactics the aliens had never encountered. The U.S. Resilience demonstrated the effectiveness of human fusion torpedoes by placing a variable yield warhead directly inside a Devourer command ship's quantum disruption field. The explosion collapsed the field back on itself, creating a cascade failure that disabled 3 nearby vessels. The U.S. Determination used its advanced maneuvering thrusters to literally ram a Devourer cruiser, its heavily armored hull tearing through biomechanical armor like it was tissue paper. The ship emerged from the other side with minor damage and immediately engaged 2 more targets. But the real revelation came when the Devourers tried to adapt to human tactics. Ma'am, Jackson reported, the enemy is attempting to modify their adaptive armor to defend against kinetic impacts. Sarah smiled grimly. Let them try. This was the crucial misunderstanding that every alien species had about human military doctrine. They assumed that because human weapons appeared simple, they actually were simple. They didn't understand that human military technology was based on a completely different philosophical approach. Where alien species developed exotic technologies to overcome the laws of physics, humans had spent centuries learning how to use those laws as weapons. The Devourer's adaptive armor began reconfiguring itself to absorb kinetic impacts, just as it had learned to absorb energy weapon strikes. But the human kinetic accelerators weren't just throwing single projectiles anymore. Initiating cluster munitions protocol, Captain Park reported from the U.S. Endurance. Instead of single tungsten rods, the kinetic accelerators began firing clouds of smaller projectiles, each one guided by quantum-entangled targeting systems. The adaptive armor could handle a single massive impact, but it couldn't adapt fast enough to deal with hundreds of smaller impacts arriving simultaneously from multiple vectors. The Devourer formation began to collapse as their ships found themselves facing weapons they couldn't counter, tactics they couldn't predict, and an enemy that seemed to view the laws of physics as suggestions rather than limitations. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez said, excitement creeping into his voice, the Devourers are pulling back their scout formations. They're consolidating around the asteroid station. Sarah nodded. Phase 2 was complete. The Devourers now knew that the human ships were a serious threat, not the minor nuisance they'd initially appeared to be. But they'd made a crucial tactical error. They'd pulled their forces back into exactly the formation that Phase 3 was designed to exploit. All ships, form up for the final approach, she ordered. It's time to crack some rocks. The asteroid station loomed ahead of them, a massive chunk of rock and metal that had been converted into the Devourer's primary manufacturing facility in this sector. Intelligence reports suggested it was producing nearly 1,000 new biomechanical ships every month, making it the single most important strategic target in the entire sector. The Council's plan was to reduce the station's defenses through sustained bombardment, then send boarding parties to capture the facility intact. It was a solid plan that would probably work, given enough time and enough casualties. The human plan was somewhat different. Jackson, are the mining charges ready? Sarah asked. All charges armed and ready for deployment, ma'am, he replied. But I have to point out that we're about to attempt something that violates several treaties, at least 3 laws of war, and probably the basic principles of common sense. Good, Sarah said. If we were following the rules, they'd expect it. The mining charges weren't actually military weapons. They were standard industrial equipment used for asteroid mining, modified with military-grade nuclear warheads and quantum-entangled detonation systems. Officially, they didn't exist. Unofficially, every human ship carried enough of them to crack a small moon. Phase 3 initiation in 60 seconds, Sarah announced to the fleet. All ships, prepare for insertion. The insertion maneuver was something that could only work with human ships, and only because human naval doctrine had been developed in the asteroid belt where collisions and debris fields were daily hazards. Instead of trying to fight through the Devourer defenses around the station, the human fleet was going to go through them. Literally through them. All ships, initiate ramming speed, Sarah ordered. To outside observers, it looked like the human fleet had gone completely insane. 12 small ships, accelerating directly toward a heavily defended position that was protected by hundreds of enemy vessels and layers of defensive systems that could vaporize entire fleets. The Devourers opened fire with everything they had. Biomechanical weapons that fired streams of corrosive plasma, quantum disruptor beams that could tear apart molecular bonds, living missiles that adapted their attack patterns in real time. And the human ships flew straight through it all. This was where 3 years of being underestimated finally paid off. The Devourers had calibrated their weapons to penetrate energy shields and exotic armor. They had no idea how to deal with ships that were protected by simple, dense matter and redundant systems. The U.S. Defiance took a direct hit from a disruptor beam that would have crippled any Council ship. The beam punched through the outer armor, penetrated 3 decks, and dissipated harmlessly against the ship's inner hull. Emergency teams sealed the breach in minutes. The U.S. Determination flew through a cloud of adaptive missiles, using its point defense systems to create a debris field that confused the missile's targeting systems. Most of them detonated uselessly against chunks of their own destroyed siblings. And, through it all, the human ships kept accelerating. 30 seconds to insertion point, Rodriguez reported. Sarah watched the tactical display as her fleet approached the asteroid station. The Devourer defenses were concentrating their fire, creating a wall of destruction that should have been impenetrable. But human ships weren't trying to penetrate it. They were trying to survive it just long enough to reach the insertion point. 10 seconds, Rodriguez called. All ships, prepare for deployment, Sarah ordered. 5 seconds. The human fleet reached the outer perimeter of the asteroid station's defenses. At this range, they were taking massive damage. The U.S. Courage had lost its main engines. The U.S. Honor was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. The U.S. Victory was flying on backup power after losing its primary reactor. But they were all still moving. Deployment, Sarah ordered. 12 ships suddenly became 60 ships as each vessel deployed its full complement of mining charges. The charges were small, fast, and completely undetectable once they separated from their parent ships. They used microthrusters to navigate through the station's defenses, quantum-entangled guidance systems to find their targets, and simple nuclear warheads to do their job. The Devourers didn't even know they were there until it was too late. All charges deployed and seeking, Jackson reported. Detonation in 90 seconds. Sarah looked out at the massive asteroid station that housed the Devourer manufacturing complex. In 90 seconds, it would be nothing but expanding debris. The destruction of this facility would set back Devourer military production by years and give the Council the breathing room they desperately needed. But first, her fleet had to survive the next 90 seconds. All ships, prepare for emergency extraction, she ordered. And remember, we're not running away. We're making a tactical withdrawal with extreme prejudice. The human ships began their escape maneuver, using the same insane tactics that had gotten them this far. Instead of trying to fight their way out through the Devourer fleet, they were going to surf an exploding asteroid. It was, Sarah reflected, exactly the kind of plan that would either make them heroes or cautionary tales. Knowing humanity's luck, it would probably be both. The countdown timer on Admiral Sarah Chen's tactical display showed 30 seconds until detonation when everything went wrong. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Jackson shouted over the noise of alarms and weapons fire. "The Devourers are deploying some kind of containment field around the asteroid. They're trying to prevent the charges from detonating." Sarah's blood went cold. The mission hinged on splitting the asteroid at its natural fault lines. If the Devourers could contain the explosion, not only would their plan fail, but 60 nuclear mining charges would be trapped in a quantum containment field that could potentially be turned against the human fleet. "Analysis," she snapped. "The field is some kind of quantum-locked compression matrix," Jackson replied, his fingers flying over his console. "It's designed to contain massive explosions by redirecting the energy into subspace." Sarah stared at the tactical display. The Devourer containment field was forming around the asteroid like a translucent bubble. In 23 seconds, their charges would detonate harmlessly inside that field, and the asteroid station would survive intact. 3 years of being underestimated and dismissed by the galaxy. 3 years of watching alien commanders treat human tactical input like a joke. 3 years of being relegated to support roles while others fought the real battles. It all came down to the next 20 seconds. "Captain Rodriguez," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. "What's the status of our experimental quantum resonance array?" Rodriguez looked at her in shock. "Ma'am, that system is completely untested. We don't even know if it works, and if it backfires, will it disrupt their containment field?" "Theoretically, yes, but do it." The quantum resonance array was humanity's most classified military project. A theoretical weapon that could disrupt quantum-locked systems by creating artificial resonance cascades. It had never been tested in combat because the potential for catastrophic failure was enormous. If it backfired, it could tear apart space-time in a localized area. But if it worked, it would shatter the Devourer containment field like glass. "All ships, emergency retreat to minimum safe distance," Sarah ordered. "And prepare for possible quantum cascade failure." "What are you planning, Admiral?" came High Admiral Zextar's voice over the communication channel. The Vorthan commander sounded confused and more than a little concerned. "Something completely insane," Sarah replied. "You might want to back your ships up." The timer showed 15 seconds when the UES Defiance's quantum resonance array came online. The device was essentially a weaponized version of the quantum entanglement communicators that connected all human ships. Instead of sending messages across space instantaneously, it sent destructive interference patterns. 12 seconds. "Array charging," Jackson reported. "Ma'am, I'm reading massive quantum fluctuations. If this doesn't work, it'll work," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. "Human engineering doesn't fail when it counts." 10 seconds. The Devourer containment field was fully formed now, a shimmering barrier that surrounded the asteroid like a soap bubble. Inside, 60 nuclear charges continued their countdown to detonation. The Devourers thought they were safe. 5 seconds. "Fire," Sarah ordered. The quantum resonance array discharged, sending a pulse of pure interference directly into the heart of the Devourer containment field. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the field began to vibrate, its perfect surface developing ripples like a pond disturbed by a stone. 3 seconds. The ripples became waves. The waves became cracks. The containment field, designed to redirect massive amounts of energy into subspace, suddenly found itself trying to contain an energy pattern that couldn't be contained, a quantum resonance cascade that existed in all possible states simultaneously. 1 second, the containment field shattered. 0. What happened next would be recorded in military textbooks for the next 1,000 years as either the most brilliant tactical improvisation in galactic history or the luckiest accident ever documented. 60 nuclear mining charges detonated simultaneously along the asteroid's fault lines, exactly as planned. But instead of a controlled demolition that would crack the asteroid cleanly in half, the explosion was amplified by the collapsing quantum field. The Devourer's own containment technology turned the detonation into a directed energy weapon that focused the blast along precise vectors. The asteroid didn't just crack, it exploded outward in a carefully controlled pattern that turned each fragment into a projectile moving at significant fractions of light speed. The Devourer station, built into the asteroid structure, was torn apart and scattered across several cubic light-minutes of space. But the real surprise came from the quantum cascade failure. "Ma'am," Jackson said, his voice filled with awe, "the cascade is propagating through their fleet's quantum communication network." Sarah watched in fascination as the quantum interference pattern spread from ship to ship through the Devourer hive mind connection. The biomechanical vessels began shutting down their quantum systems one by one, trying to prevent the cascade from spreading further. "They're severing their hive mind connection," she realized. They'd rather fight blind than risk total system failure. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and devastating. Without their quantum communication network, the individual ships reverted to basic survival protocols. They couldn't coordinate attacks, share tactical data, or adapt their defenses in real time. They were reduced to acting as individual units instead of a unified organism. And individual Devourer ships, it turned out, were not particularly impressive opponents. "All Council ships, this is Admiral Chun," Sarah broadcast on the General Communication Channel. "The Devourer command structure has been disrupted. Recommend immediate exploitation of tactical advantage." The response was swift. High Admiral Zextar's voice came back over the channel. But this time there was no condescension, no barely concealed amusement. "Admiral Chun, how did you never mind? All units, advance and engage. The humans have given us an opening." What followed was less a battle than a rout. The Devourer ships, cut off from their collective intelligence and unable to adapt to changing tactics, fell back on predictable defensive patterns that the Council forces had learned to counter decades ago. Ships that had seemed invincible when fighting as a coordinated swarm became easy targets when forced to fight alone. Sarah watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as the Council fleet systematically dismantled the Devourer formation. But her attention was focused on something else, the 12 human ships that were riding the shock wave from the exploding asteroid. This was the most dangerous part of their plan. The expanding debris field was moving fast enough to damage even heavily armored ships, and the quantum disturbances from the cascade failure were playing havoc with their navigation systems. "All ships, maintain formation," she ordered. "Use the debris field as cover and prepare for emergency evasive maneuvers." The UES Defiance shuddered as a chunk of asteroid debris the size of a building bounced off its armored hull. Emergency teams rushed to seal microfractures in the armor, while the engineering crew worked to compensate for the gravitational distortions caused by the quantum cascade. "Captain Rodriguez," Sarah said, "how are the other ships holding up?" "Better than expected, ma'am. The UES Courage lost its forward shield generators, and the UES Honor is reporting minor hull breaches, but everyone's still flying." Sarah nodded. Human ships were designed to operate in the asteroid belt, where collisions and system failures were daily hazards. Their redundant systems, thick armor, and over-engineered components were exactly what was needed to survive this kind of punishment. "Admiral," Jackson called, "I'm reading multiple Devourer ships attempting to pursue us through the debris field." Sarah looked at the tactical display. Several Devourer vessels were trying to follow the human fleet through the expanding wreckage of their former stronghold. It was a tactically sound decision. Eliminating the ships that had just destroyed their most important facility should be a top priority. But It was also exactly what Sarah had been hoping for. All ships, prepare to demonstrate Phase 4, she ordered. Let's show them what happens when you follow humans into a debris field. Phase 4 of their plan was based on a simple observation. Most alien species thought three-dimensionally when it came to space combat. They maneuvered up, down, forward, and back, but they didn't really understand how to use environmental hazards as weapons. Humans, on the other hand, had learned to fight in 3 dimensions while navigating asteroid fields, nebulae, and the gravitational chaos around gas giant moons. They didn't just think in 3 dimensions, they thought in 4 dimensions, using time and momentum as tactical variables. The pursuing Devourer ships learned this the hard way. Instead of trying to outrun their pursuers, the human fleet began a series of maneuvers that seemed random to outside observers. Ships would suddenly brake, allowing massive chunks of debris to pass in front of them, then accelerate again. Others would use gravitational assist from larger asteroids to change course at impossible angles. To the Devourers, it looked like the humans were panicking, making desperate evasive maneuvers to avoid the debris field they'd created. In reality, they were herding the pursuing ships into a carefully orchestrated trap. Now, Sarah ordered. The human fleet suddenly scattered, each ship heading in a different direction. The Devourer ships, caught in the middle of the debris field, tried to follow but found themselves surrounded by fast-moving asteroids that seemed to be targeting them specifically. Because they were. Ma'am, Jackson reported with obvious satisfaction. All 12 gravitational anchors have deployed successfully. The Devourers are caught in an artificial gravity well. The gravitational anchors were another piece of human mining equipment that had been modified for military use. Designed to hold asteroids in place during mining operations, they could create localized gravity fields strong enough to trap ships and redirect debris. The pursuing Devourer vessels found themselves pulled inexorably toward the largest asteroid fragments, unable to escape the artificial gravity well that the humans had created around them. One by one, they were crushed between moving mountains of rock and metal. That should discourage anyone else from trying to follow us, Captain Rodriguez observed. Sarah nodded, but her attention was already moving to the next phase of their operation. The Devourer station was destroyed, their fleet was scattered, and their command structure was in chaos. But the real test was yet to come. Open a channel to the Council fleet, she ordered. High Admiral Zextar appeared on the main screen, but this time his 4 eyes weren't blinking with amusement. Instead, he looked impressed, confused. It was hard to tell with Vorthan expressions. Admiral Chun, he said slowly, I believe an explanation is in order. What exactly did your fleet just accomplish? Sarah smiled. For 3 years, she'd been waiting for this moment. The moment when the galaxy stopped treating humanity like a cosmic joke and started taking them seriously. High Admiral, she said, we just demonstrated that there's more than one way to fight a war. And we're just getting started. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 300-year history. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime, their voices creating a cacophony of clicking, whistling, and electronic translation that spoke of barely controlled chaos. Admiral Sarah Chun stood at the center of it all, flanked by her senior officers, as alien dignitaries demanded explanations for what the media was already calling the human miracle. 3 days had passed since the destruction of the Devourer stronghold at Kepler Station, and the ramifications were still rippling through galactic civilization. High Counselor Veltar of the Altarian Collective raised one of her 6 arms for attention. The chamber gradually quieted as the ancient reptilian leader's crystalline voice filled the space. Admiral Chun, she began, her words carrying the weight of absolute authority. In 72 hours, your species has accomplished what our combined fleets have failed to achieve in 50 years of warfare. The Devourer advance has not merely been halted, they are in full retreat across 3 sectors. Sarah remained at attention, but inside she felt a surge of pride. The reports had been flooding in since the battle. Without their primary manufacturing facility, and with their quantum communication network compromised, the Devourers were abandoning positions they'd held for decades. Entire star systems were being liberated as the biomechanical invaders fell back to regroup. However, Veltar continued, and Sarah heard the verbal trap being set. Your methods have raised serious concerns among the council membership. The use of untested quantum weapons, the deployment of unregistered military technologies, and the deliberate violation of established tactical doctrines. With respect, High Counselor, Sarah interrupted, causing a ripple of shock through the assembly. No one interrupted Veltar. Ever. Humanity never agreed to limit our military development to council-approved technologies. The chamber erupted in alien voices. Sarah could make out several species demanding that humans be censured for their reckless endangerment of galactic security. Others were calling for immediate integration of human tactical innovations into council doctrine. High Admiral Zextar stepped forward from the Vorthan delegation. His four eyes were focused intently on Sarah, and his mechanical translator gave his words a formal cadence. Admiral Chun speaks correctly, he announced, surprising everyone in the chamber. The Terran Union was granted associate membership with minimal restrictions precisely because their military capabilities were deemed negligible. He paused, and Sarah could swear she detected humor in his alien expression. It appears that assessment was inaccurate. Veltar's head swiveled to focus on Zextar. Are you suggesting the Council was deliberately misled about human military potential? Not deliberately, another voice said from the gallery. Ambassador Patricia Reeves, Earth's senior diplomatic representative, stepped forward with the easy confidence of someone who had spent decades navigating alien politics. We've been completely transparent about our capabilities. The problem is that nobody bothered to ask the right questions. Sarah watched as Ambassador Reeves moved to the center of the chamber. The woman was a master diplomat who had negotiated humanity's acceptance into galactic civilization, and Sarah could see her shifting into full political mode. When humans applied for council membership, Reeves explained, the evaluation teams focused on energy output, shield technology, and vessel size. They classified our kinetic weapons as primitive and our armor as archaic, without conducting any actual performance tests. She gestured to a holographic display that appeared in the center of the chamber. What they didn't understand is that human military doctrine isn't based on matching alien technology. It's based on exploiting the fundamental laws of physics that govern all technology. The display showed a comparison between standard council ships and human vessels. To most observers, the difference was obvious. Alien ships were larger, more heavily armed, and powered by exotic energy sources that humans could barely comprehend. However, Reeves continued, when you factor in operational parameters like debris field navigation, environmental hazard management, and asymmetric tactical deployment, the display shifted to show combat effectiveness ratings across different scenarios. In traditional fleet engagements, human ships ranked near the bottom. But in complex environmental situations, asteroid fields, nebulae, gravity wells, they dominated the charts. High Counselor Veltar studied the data with growing interest. You're saying that human military technology was specifically designed for unconventional warfare? We're saying that human military technology was designed by survivors, Sarah interjected. Every system on our ships exists because somewhere in our history, humans died when those systems weren't available. We don't have the luxury of energy shields because we never developed them. Instead, we build armor that can survive direct impacts from relativistic debris. She gestured to Lieutenant Commander Jackson, who stepped forward with a datapad. The quantum resonance array that disrupted the Devourer hive mind, Jackson said. That wasn't a weapon. It's a modified communication system. We turned our own technology against itself because we understand that every system has vulnerabilities if you know where to look. The chamber was quiet now, alien representatives leaning forward to hear every word. Sarah realized that this moment would define humanity's place in galactic civilization for generations to come. For 3 years, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast assembly hall. You've treated us like primitives who somehow stumbled into space travel. You assigned us to support roles and minimal responsibilities because you assumed our technology was inferior. She paused, looking around at the hundreds of alien faces focused on her. But you never asked the right question. Inferior for what? Our ships aren't designed to fight your kind of war. They're designed to fight human wars. Asymmetric, adaptive, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. High Admiral Zextar stepped forward again. Admiral Chan, are you suggesting that humans have been holding back their true military capabilities? Sarah exchanged a glance with Ambassador Reeves. They discussed this moment during the flight to Nexus Prime, knowing it would inevitably arise. High Admiral, Sarah said carefully, what we've shown you represents approximately 15% of current human military technology. The other 85% is still classified as experimental or deemed too dangerous for field deployment. The chamber exploded into chaos again. Representatives were shouting demands for full disclosure, while others insisted that such weapons should be banned immediately. Through it all, High Counselor Veltar remained silent, her ancient eyes fixed on Sarah with an expression that might have been respect or concern. When the noise finally died down, Veltar spoke again. Admiral Chan, the Council requires a full briefing on human military capabilities. The war against the Devourers is far from over, and if your species possesses weapons that could end the conflict. With respect, High Counselor, Ambassador Reeves interrupted smoothly. Humanity's military technologies are classified under our sovereign rights as an associate council member. We're not required to share classified information without appropriate guarantees. What kind of guarantees? Asked Defense Coordinator Krell of the Hegemony Worlds. Sarah smiled. This was the moment they'd been building towards since the battle began. Full council membership, she said simply. Equal representation, equal voting rights, and equal access to council military and technological resources. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Smaller species representatives began calculating how human military support could protect their own territories. Larger powers worried about the shift in galactic balance that human capabilities represented. High Admiral Zextar was the first to speak. The Vorthan Empire would support such a proposal, contingent on full tactical integration between human and council forces. The Altarian Collective concurs, Veltar added, surprising many in the chamber. However, we would require assurances that human weapons technology would not be used against council members. Ambassador Reeves nodded. Humanity has no interest in conquest or aggression against our allies. Our only goal is the elimination of the Devourer threat and the establishment of lasting peace. Sarah watched as the political machinery of galactic civilization began to work. Representatives huddled in species groups, electronic translators buzzed with urgent conversations, and centuries-old alliances were being re-evaluated in real time. There is, however, one immediate concern, Defense Coordinator Krell announced. Intelligence reports indicate that the Devourers are massing a massive fleet in the Outer Rim. Without their primary manufacturing facility, they appear to be consolidating their remaining forces for a final assault on Council space. Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The destruction of Kepler Station had been a major victory, but it had also made the Devourers desperate. A desperate enemy was often more dangerous than a confident one. What's the estimated fleet size? She asked. Over 10,000 ships, Krell replied grimly. The largest Devourer force ever assembled. They're apparently willing to commit everything to a single decisive battle. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Council's combined fleet numbered perhaps 3,000 ships, and many of those were tied up defending critical systems. Even with human tactical support, the odds would be overwhelming. Admiral Chan, High Counselor Veltar said quietly, can humanity's unconventional methods overcome such odds? Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking about the experimental technologies still locked away in classified Earth facilities. Quantum tunnel bombs that could bypass any known defense. Gravity manipulation systems that could turn gas giants into weapons. AI-controlled swarm fighters that could adapt faster than biological pilots could react. High Counselor, she said finally, give us full council membership and complete tactical authority for the defense operation, and I'll show you what humans can accomplish when we stop holding back. The vote took 6 hours and involved more political maneuvering than Sarah had seen in her entire military career. But when the final tally was announced, the result was unanimous. The Terran Union was granted full council membership with emergency military authority to coordinate the defense against the Devourer final assault. As Sarah left the assembly hall, accompanied by her officers and Ambassador Reeves. She felt the weight of galactic civilization settling on her shoulders. In a few weeks, she would command the largest military force in recorded history in a battle that would determine the survival of dozens of species. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Jackson said quietly as they walked toward their transport. Are you sure we can deliver on those promises? 10,000 ships is a lot, even for us. Sarah looked up at the alien sky of Nexus Prime, where the lights of hundreds of ships could be seen moving between the orbital platforms. Jackson, she said, 3 days ago the galaxy thought we were primitives flying garbage scows. Now they're asking us to save galactic civilization. She smiled grimly. I'd say our reputation has improved considerably. Time to see if we can live up to it. The Tartarus system had been chosen as humanity's final gift to galactic civilization for a very specific reason. It was the perfect place to die fighting. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, now flagship of the largest military fleet in recorded history, watching as 10,000 Devourer ships emerged from quantum tunnel space like a plague of mechanical locusts. Around her, 3,000 council vessels held formation, their crews representing dozens of species united in desperate hope. But it was the ships that couldn't be seen that would determine the outcome of this battle. Phase 1 positions confirmed, reported Captain Rodriguez, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. All stealth vessels are in position. Ghost Fleet is ready for deployment. Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Ghost Fleet was humanity's most closely guarded secret. 1,000 ships that existed in quantum superposition, simultaneously present and absent until the moment of observation collapsed their wave functions. It was technology that violated several known laws of physics and had taken Earth's brightest scientists 15 years to develop. The Devourers had brought everything they had left. Biomechanical dreadnoughts the size of small moons. Swarm carriers that could deploy millions of fighter craft. World killers that could crack planets like eggs. It was a force capable of sterilizing entire sectors of the galaxy. Admiral, came High Admiral Zextar's voice over the communication channel. The Devourer fleet is moving into attack formation. They appear to be deploying some kind of new weapon system. Sarah studied the enemy formation. The Devourers had learned from their defeat at Kepler Station. Their ships were maintaining quantum communication silence to prevent cascade failures, and they developed new armor that could adapt to kinetic impacts. Most concerning of all, they seemed to have developed countermeasures for human tactical innovations. They've been studying us, Lieutenant Commander Jackson observed. Those new ships have reinforced hulls designed to handle debris impacts, and their formation spacing is optimized to prevent chain reactions. Good, Sarah replied, surprising her bridge crew. That means they're thinking about us, not about what we're really planning to do. The real plan wasn't about ships or weapons or tactics. It was about something far more fundamental, the difference between fighting to win and fighting to survive. The Devourers wanted to destroy galactic civilization. The Council wanted to preserve it. But humanity? Humanity wanted to rewrite the rules of warfare itself. All ships, this is Admiral Chun, she announced on the fleet-wide channel. In approximately 30 minutes, we're going to demonstrate why humans became the dominant species on the most dangerous planet in known space. Not because we're stronger, faster, or smarter than everything else, but because we refuse to quit when quitting makes sense. She paused, looking out at the approaching Devourer horde. Today, the galaxy will learn why humans don't surrender. Not because we can't lose, but because we won't let our defeats define us. Operations Achilles, Prometheus, and Pandora are authorized. Show them what we're made of. What followed was a masterclass in strategic deception that would be studied in military academies for millennia. Operation Achilles began first. Instead of the traditional fleet engagement that everyone expected, the Council forces suddenly scattered into small groups, each unit heading in a different direction. To the Devourers, it looked like the opening moves of a fighting retreat. Exactly what their tactical algorithms predicted humans would attempt. But it wasn't a retreat. It was a setup. Each scattered group was dragging the Devourer forces toward specific points in the Tartarus system. Points where humanity had spent the last 3 weeks making very particular modifications to local space-time. Devourer pursuit groups are following our projected vectors, Captain Park reported from the UES determination. They're taking the bait. Sarah watched as thousands of enemy ships spread out across the system, chasing what they believed were fleeing Council forces. The Devourers had adapted to fight humans, but they hadn't adapted to fight human paranoia. Initiate Operation Prometheus, she ordered. Operation Prometheus was based on a simple observation. The Devourers had spent 50 years learning to fight energy weapons, exotic matter, and conventional tactics. They had no experience fighting opponents who treated the fundamental forces of nature as tactical resources. The modifications humanity had made to the Tartarus system weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were alterations to the quantum substrate of space-time itself, invisible changes that would only become apparent when activated. The first sign that something was wrong came when Devourer ships began reporting navigation anomalies. Their quantum tunneling systems, which allowed faster-than-light travel, started malfunctioning. Ships would attempt to jump to new positions and find themselves moving in unexpected directions. "Ma'am," Jackson reported, "quantum tunneling disruption is at 40% and climbing. The Devourers are losing tactical mobility." Sarah nodded. Humanity had weaponized the same quantum entanglement principles that powered their communication systems. By creating interference patterns in the quantum substrate, they'd turned the entire Tartarus system into a maze where conventional physics didn't quite work the way they should. But that was just the opening move. "All units, begin Operation Pandora," Sarah commanded. Operation Pandora was humanity's answer to the question that had plagued military strategists since the dawn of warfare. How do you defeat an enemy that outnumbers you 3-1? The answer, it turned out, was that you don't fight their fleet. You fight their logistics. The Ghost Fleet materialized all at once, 1,000 ships appearing in the heart of the Devourer formation like a conjuring trick. But these weren't attack vessels. They were specialized craft designed for a single purpose: quantum viral warfare. "Ghost Fleet is deploying viral packages," Captain Rodriguez reported. "Target, Devourer Command, and Control Networks." The quantum viruses were perhaps the most insidious weapon humanity had ever developed. They weren't designed to destroy Devourer ships. They were designed to make those ships fight each other. Each virus was a self-replicating quantum program that infiltrated biomechanical systems and began subtly altering command protocols. Ships would receive orders that seemed legitimate but contained small errors, navigate to coordinates that were slightly off, target friendly vessels instead of enemies, activate defensive systems at exactly the wrong moment. The effect was gradual at first. A few Devourer ships began firing on their neighbors due to targeting errors. Others attempted to occupy the same physical space as their formation partners. Command ships started issuing contradictory orders to their subordinates. But as the viruses replicated and spread through the biomechanical network, chaos began to compound. "Devourer formation integrity is breaking down," Jackson reported with obvious satisfaction. "Their ships are fighting each other almost as much as they're fighting us." Sarah watched the tactical display as the massive enemy fleet began to tear itself apart from within. But she knew this was only buying them time. The Devourers would eventually adapt to the viral attack, and when they did, humanity would face the full fury of everything that survived. "All Council units, this is Admiral Chun," she broadcast. "Phase 2 begins now. Show them what united we can accomplish." The scattered Council forces suddenly reversed course, converging on the confused Devourer fleet from multiple vectors. But this wasn't the same fleet that had fled the system an hour earlier. During their apparent retreat, the Council ships had been busy. Vorthan vessels had deployed gravity mines throughout the system. Krellin dreadnoughts had seeded space with quantum resonance amplifiers. Zephyrian cruisers had established a network of tactical relay stations that could coordinate attacks across light years in real time. And the humans had done something that no sane species would attempt. They'd turned the system's star into a weapon. "Solar modification complete," Captain Rodriguez reported. "Helios Array is ready for activation." The Helios Array was humanity's most ambitious project, a network of quantum manipulators that could influence stellar activity by creating artificial magnetic field fluctuations. It was technology that bordered on godlike power, capable of triggering solar flares with the energy output of entire civilizations. Target the largest Devourer command cluster, Sarah ordered. Ma'am, Jackson said quietly. Once we fire this thing, there's no going back. The energy release will be visible from halfway across the galaxy. Sarah nodded grimly. The Helios array would only work once. After that, every species in known space would demand that humanity either share the technology or be destroyed to prevent its misuse. But, if it worked, it would end the Devourer threat forever. Fire, she commanded. The star seemed to shudder. For a moment, nothing visible happened. Then, a massive solar flare erupted from the system's primary star, a directed stream of plasma and radiation that crossed the space between star and fleet in seconds. The effect on the Devourer ships was instantaneous and devastating. Biomechanical armor that could adapt to energy weapons couldn't adapt to the fundamental force that powered all life in the galaxy. Ships simply vaporized in the stellar wind, their quantum systems overloaded by energies beyond anything they'd ever encountered. But the real masterstroke was what happened next. The quantum viruses that had been spreading through the Devourer fleet hadn't just been causing confusion. They'd been mapping the biomechanical network, creating a complete picture of how the hive mind functioned. When the solar flare hit, the viruses activated their final protocol, complete network integration. Every surviving Devourer ship suddenly found itself connected to a new quantum network, one controlled by human AI systems. Network integration complete, Jackson reported, awe creeping into his voice. Ma'am, we've just taken control of the entire Devourer fleet. Sarah stared at the tactical display as thousands of enemy vessels suddenly changed their identification signals. Ships that had been trying to destroy galactic civilization moments before were now broadcasting Council recognition codes. This is Admiral Chun to all Devourer vessels under human control, she announced. You will stand down immediately and prepare for inspection teams. Resistance is futile because you're now working for us. The surviving independent Devourer ships found themselves facing an impossible situation. They were outnumbered not just by Council forces, but by their own former allies. The biomechanical ships under human control knew all their tactics, all their weaknesses, and all their secrets. The battle ended not with a climactic explosion, but with a series of surrenders as the remaining Devourer forces realized they were fighting an unwinnable war. High Admiral Zextar's voice came over the communication channel, filled with something Sarah had never heard from him before, genuine respect. Admiral Chun, he said slowly, in my species' 3,000-year military history, I have never witnessed anything comparable to what you've just accomplished. You didn't just defeat the Devourers, you converted them. Sarah looked out at the aftermath of the battle. Where 10,000 enemy ships had threatened galactic civilization an hour ago, there was now the largest fleet in recorded history flying under Council control. The Devourer threat hadn't just been ended. It had been turned into the foundation of galactic security for generations to come. High Admiral, she replied. We told you we'd show the galaxy what humans could accomplish when we stopped holding back. Today, the galaxy learned that humans don't just survive impossible odds. We turn them into advantages. She paused, looking around at her bridge crew. People who had been dismissed as primitives flying garbage scows just weeks ago. The universe mocked us for being weak. But it never understood that our weakness was a choice. Today, we chose to be strong. And tomorrow, the galaxy will be a safer place because humans decided to stop playing by everyone else's rules. As the Defiance led the massive combined fleet toward the nearest Council world, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Humanity had started as the galaxy's comic relief, tolerated but not respected. Now they were the species that other civilizations would study, fear, and aspire to understand. The galaxy had mocked them until they unleashed the true power of their Armada. And, in doing so, humanity had proven that sometimes the best way to win a war isn't to fight it. It's to redefine what victory means. The stars themselves would remember this day, and they would never underestimate humanity again.